room today and I'm going to show you how to bind a quilt, and I'm continuing on with my Quillow that I've been making, and you can see me make that in a separate video. And the binding technique I'm going to show you today is the same that you can use for any quilt that you make. So let's get started. The binding technique that I use on my quilts is called double fold binding, and I start with 2.5 inch width strips. And I do, for this quilt, I needed 4 width of fabric strips. And you can determine how many strips and the length of the strips that you need really simply by just adding up the sides of your quilt. And so I showed you here. And then you just add 15 inches extra for your corners and for joining your strips. And so they start like this, and then I fold it in half and press. And they're ready to lay on the quilt, and I'll show you how to join these strips. But before I do that, I'm going to take the quilt to the machine and I'm going to finish stitching. I've started it here. I've stitched the layers together with about a 1/8 inch seam, and it just holds it together nicely and gets it ready for applying the binding. So let's take it to the machine and I'll show you that. I like to pin my layers together in the corners especially. I don't need to do a lot of pinning, but just so it stays lined up. And I'll just maybe add another one down here. In this corner I've already sewn. That looks pretty good. So I'll use a really small seam allowance. And I just check to make sure that the bottom layer is there and getting caught up. To attach your binding strips to each other, because you want one continuous binding strip, you place one of your strips face up, the other face down, like this. Usually just pin it right in the middle. And I'm going to stitch from the upper left here to the lower right. And to get them even, you just try to start right here at this corner and try to end right here at this intersection here. So I'll take it to the machine and show you that. So again, I'm going to try to line it up in that intersection there. And I do like to back stitch. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. That looks pretty good. There's my seam. I'm just going to flip the top piece over, fold it. That looks pretty even. So now I can come back this way and snip off this excess fabric. And I just leave about 1/4 to 1/2 inch seam allowance right there. And I'll have to snip it a little bit more. Now what I'll do is take it to the iron and press this seam open. And snip off these ends here. I usually do it after I press it, but just to show you really quickly. And now you have your binding strips attached. I'll give that a quick press. And then to fold your binding, all you do is fold it in half like this. And there's little tools that you can buy to help you with this part, but for me, I just find it's pretty simple. And I just keep pressing until all my binding is pressed and it's all in one piece. So I'll keep doing that and meet you back over at the quilt. First, attach the binding strip to the wrong side of my quilt. I do consider this a reversible quilt, but I'm going to consider the fleece to be the wrong side. And I'm going to leave about a 6-inch tail hanging. So I'll start sewing right here, and I've aligned raw edge to raw edge. And I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. And then when we get to the corner, I'll stop and show you how I do the corners. So I'll take it to the machine now. And I forgot to mention that I do like to start my binding kind of midway along one of the sides of the quilt. So I have it lined up, and I'm leaving my tail, and I do tack it down. I'm approaching my corner, and I'm going to try to stop about 1/4 to 1/2 inch away from my corner. That looks pretty good. I'm going to take another, and I'm going to tie it off. And remove it from the machine. And I'll show you how I fold this. So I just bring the fabric up like this. So there's a diagonal right here. And then fold it down. So it's across here. Put it back under the presser foot. Start at the corner and continue on. And you do that at each corner. I'm approaching my next corner. So I'm going to slow down. I'll show you that again. I'm going to try to stop about right here. I'm going to tie it off. Again, I'm going to fold it, fold the binding strip up so you have your diagonal, and then just fold it right down. Hold it in place with your finger. Fold it down, so now you have a fold here. Just hold on to it. Flip the quilt around. And just start sewing again, and remember to tack down at the beginning. And I'll just finish the other 2 corners the same exact way as I just showed you. I've come around to where I've begun, so I'm going to leave a little tail here on this end, and I'm going to tie off. And I'll show you how I join these 2 ends together. I have my quilt flat on the table, and I went ahead and snipped off my excess binding strip. So the next thing I'm going to do is fold my first tail over. I'm just going to use this rolly, and I showed this on my prior video. just to make a crease, and I'm actually going to put it on my cutting mat so it'll crease a little bit easier. Hopefully you can see that. Now with my other tail, I'm going to just bring it right up to meet my folded tail. Fold it back to meet it as well. I'm going to do the same thing. Put it here on my cutting mat and crease it. It's a little hard to see, but I think I can manage. And then I'm going to sew these right sides together. So I'm going to open up, and I'm just going to use my disappearing ink pen again that I used for my quilting lines. And I'm just going to draw my sewing line on my crease. I'm going to do that with my other tail. And I can see my crease here. And I can see it here. And I'm going to take it back to the machine, and I'm going to put these right sides together. I'm going to match up my lines. There and there, and I'm going to pin it. I'll do the same thing on the bottom. That looks pretty good. And I'll take it to the machine and stitch straight down this line. I'm going to keep my bindings lined up the best I can, and again I'm going to tack down at the beginning and at the end of my seam. Now I'm just going to trim off my excess fabric. And I'm just going to give it a little finger press here. See how it looks. Fold it back together. And that looks pretty nice. And so now I'm going to continue stitching it down from where I stopped and where I began. Again, I'm going to tack down at the beginning and end of my seams. It's a little bunchy right here. I could have done it a little bit of a shorter tail, but that's okay. It'll just get hidden in the binding when I flip it. The next step is to flip your binding over to the other side, like so. And I like to clip it with these little wonder clips. Just clip it like that. And I do not clip the whole thing. I'll just probably put 5 at a time, and then at the sewing machine I'll put some more in. And I usually start in the middle of a side of the quilt, And what I'm gonna do is sew about 1/8 of an inch right along here, and it will show on this side. There's no getting around it. The only thing you can do is to hand sew it, which I've done before, but not with a baby quilt because it's probably gonna get washed a lot and I want it to be really strong. So I'll take it to the machine and start sewing. I am gonna pull my thread, my bobbin thread up to the front because I don't want it to make a mess on the back. Okay. I'm coming up to my corner and I wanted to show you how I fold that. Just fold the side like that and then I pull the bottom up. It's a little bulky. And I try to make this a diagonal line and bring it up even with this side the best I can. It's not going to be perfect. Turn the quilt. And continue on. I'll show you the corner one more time. Again, I fold it on the side and then just bring the bottom up to meet it. Turn the quilt and keep going. So the binding is attached. I wanted to show you the corner, how it looks on this side and this side. And it just adds like a quilting line on the back. Here's the front of the quilt showing the stitch lines where I've attached the pocket. I think the lines blend in nicely with the other quilting, but if it does bother you, you can always hand sew your pocket to your quilt. And now I will show you how to fold it into a pillow. I do have a video online already that shows how to fold a Quillow, but I wanted to show you really quickly on this one as well. So you start with your pocket facing you face down. You fold the quilt into thirds, overlap the edges, flip it over so your pocket is on top, reach in with your hand, grab the bottom of your quilt and pull it into the pocket. Stuff it in there, then fold from the top in thirds or fourths, it doesn't matter, and stuff that into the pocket as well. Smooth it out. And you have a pillow. Thank you for watching. I hope you give this project a try. They make great little gifts, and I will see you next time.